Hi, I'm Magdi, your teacher for Anatomy and Physiology Bio 201 Lab. This video, just like all of my other videos, are intended to be for GCU students who are enrolled in one of my classes. Please do not share this video with any other student. Today we're going to cover Lab 8, which is the joints and muscle tissue. So we'll talk first about the joints, and then towards the end of the lab we will discuss the muscle tissue. This lecture was prepared by one of the physical therapists who is teaching at GCU, so I would like to give her credit for that. So first we need to give some definitions. First, what is an articulation? Articulation is basically a joint. And what is a joint? A joint is the place where bones meet. The joints allow us to do movements, however not all joints are mobile. So there are three different types of joints. The first one's called synarthrosis, without a movement joint. And the last one's called diarthrosis, which are the joints that are freely mobile. And then in between that, we have the amphiarthrosis. And as you know, the word amphi means in between, just like amphipathic. And these ones are slightly mobile or movable joints. So if we further classify that, we'll start first with the synarthrosis joints. We have either sutures, synchondroses, or synostosis. So the sutures are the joints between the skull bones, and this is the only place that we call joints a suture. And as we know, we don't have any mobility or movement that occur between the skull bones. When these sutures become a bone, when they ossify, we call this one synostosis. An example of that is the suture that we start to have here at the beginning. It's called the metopic or frontal suture, and this suture ossifies, so it's no longer present. So we call that synostosis. We have also synchondroses, which is an example of that are the costal cartilages that connects our ribs to the sternum. The next class of the joints are the amphipathic joints, and we have two types. We have the symphysis type in the symphysis pubis, and we have the syndosmosis type. An example of that is a distal joint between the tibia and fibula. We are all familiar with this type, which is called diarthrosis, and the main type here are called the synovial joints, and these ones allow free movement. We classify the diarthrosis based on their plane of movement into monoaxial, biaxial, and triaxial. And as we know, mono means one, bi means two, and tri means three. So the monoaxial allow movement in only one plane, just like your elbow joint and the knee joint. The elbow joint can do only flexion and extension, and this is only one movement in one plane, which is the sagittal plane. Biaxial joints allow you to move in two planes. An example of that is the wrist joint. And as we know, the wrist joint can allow flexion, extension, as well as abduction and adduction. So these are two different planes. Triaxials are the joints that are freely mobile, like the shoulder and the hip. These ones can do movement in all three planes. They can do flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, medial, and lateral rotation. We have more definitions here. We'll start with the first one, which is called the joint capsule, which is basically a membrane of connective tissue that surrounds the joint. And so the joint capsule basically gives us the space or the boundaries of the joint. Next, we have the articular cartilage, which is a type of hyaline cartilage that covers the surface of the bone at the articulation. Then we have synovial fluid, which is a fluid that is released by the joint capsule and the synovial membrane in the joint capsule. And it has three main functions, including the lubrication, the distribution of nutrients, and shock absorption. So lubrication of what? This is the lubrication of the joint surfaces. Distribution of nutrients, because as we know, the cartilage that makes this joint is avascular. We know that all cartilages are avascular and they lack also nerve supply. So the way that they get the nutrients is either from the bone that's below them or from the synovial fluid. And finally, shock absorption, because the synovial fluid provides some sort of cushion. Then we have the meniscus, or menisci for plural, and these ones are made by fibrocartilage. These ones are also located between the bones, but they are located on top of the articular cartilages. The menisci are not present in most joints. An example of a joint that has a menisci will be our knee joints. Next, we have fat pads, that is formed of adipose tissue, and these ones also help with cushion. We have also bursa, which are fluid-filled spaces, and these ones also produce friction between the joints and the muscles above. We'll see an example of that. And finally, we have ligaments, and the main function of the ligaments is to help support the joint and prevent a dislocation or movement of the bones from their articular surfaces. Here is an example of a joint. On the right here I have my knee joint, which includes all components. So let's go to this very simple picture. First, this is my bone, and as we remember, this is my cancellous bone, and here is my growth plate. Okay, so then we come towards the end of the bone. There is a cartilage. This is a hyaline cartilage, and this hyaline cartilage in this location is called articular cartilage. So this is my cartilage. Then we have this joint capsule here, and that joint capsule will have a synovial membrane that's going to secrete my synovial fluid. Here is my knee joint, and this is a lateral view. So here is my patella, my femur, and my tibia. Above the tibia, you can see this articular cartilage, and below the femur you can see also articular cartilage. But in addition to that, we have in between them, we have a meniscus. So this meniscus is extra support to the knee joint. You can also see a fat pad here, and you can see multiple bursae. So here's a bursa, here's another bursa, and here's another one, and here's a fourth one. So these bursae, as you can see, they are above the joint, and they allow free movement of either the skin, in this example, or the ligament. So this is my patellar ligament, and it has bursa below it, or deep to it, and has a bursa also this more superficial to it. So as this ligament is moving, there is a fluid-filled bag that decreases the friction between that ligament and the bone, or that ligament and the skin. Here is another bursa that also decreases friction between the patella and the skin, and here is another bursa that decreases the friction between the muscles above that joint and the joint itself. Next, we will go to the intervertebral discs, and there is two components that we need to talk about in the intervertebral disc. The first component is called the annulus fibrosus, which is basically a fibrocartilage. Just as an example of fibrocartilage, and we spoke about this earlier in the connective tissue chapter. And in the middle here, we have the nucleus pulposus. And the nucleus pulposus is composed of gelatinous core, and it helps the shock absorption. So what happens if this annulus fibrosus broke and then the gelatinous material is leaking outside. Well, this is what's called disc herniation. So disc herniation occurs when the nucleus pulposus herniates or breaks through the annulus fibrosus. So in order for disc herniation to occur, the annulus fibrosus has to completely break. Compare this to another situation which is called the disc bulge. Well, in the disc bulge, what happens is the nucleus pulposus is protruding through the annulus fibrosus, but the annulus fibrosus is not broken completely yet. Here is an example like that. So if we suppose that there is still a very small thin rim of the of the annulus fibrosus that did not break yet, and that and the nucleus pulposus is pushing through that very thin rim without completely protruding outside, then we will call this disc bulge. So this is the difference between the disc bulge and disc herniation. Then we will move to the shoulder joint. We know that this is a ball and socket joint, so it's very important to know the type of this joint. It's a ball and socket. So what's the ball here? The ball is my head of humerus. And what's the socket? The socket is my glenoid cavity or glenoid fossa of the scapula. As we know that shoulder joint is very mobile, and mobility is inversely proportional to the stability. So if you have a joint that's very mobile, it will be very, very unstable. So in order to increase the stability of the shoulder joint, what we have to do is to add ligaments. So we have different ligaments. We have a ligament that connects the coracoid process to the clavicle. So we call this ligament here my Acromioclavicular Ligament. Another ligament that extends from the coracoid process to the acromion. So we'll call this the coracoacromial ligament. And another ligament here that attaches the clavicle to the acromion. So we call this Acromioclavicular Ligament. The function of all these ligaments is to provide extra support to the unstable shoulder joint. Here are the ligaments again that we just covered: acromioclavicular, coracoclavicular, and coracoacromial. But in addition to that, we have also the coracohumeral ligament that attaches from the coracoid process to the humerus. And we have also the glenohumeral ligaments, and this one attached from the glenoid cavity or fossa to the head of the humerus. And all these ligaments provide extra support to the shoulder joint to prevent shoulder joint dislocation. In addition to that, we have also a group of muscles. These muscles are called the rotator cuff muscles, and these muscles we will speak about in the next unit. But for now, just know that there are rotator cuff muscles that do support the shoulder joint and prevent the shoulder joint from getting dislocated. Also, in order to make this glenoid fossa a little bit more deep, we increase the depth by having the glenoid labrum. So that glenoid labrum is extra layer of fibrocartilage that increase the depth of the glenoid fossa. Next is our elbow joint, which is a hinge joint. Hinge joint means that it can move only in one plane. So the elbow joint has three ligaments surrounding it. We have one ligament that's on the ulnar side. We call this ulnar collateral ligament. We have another ligament that we cannot see in this picture. On the radial side, we call it radial collateral ligament. And we have a third ligament that's very important. This ligament actually makes sure that the radius is present all the time within the radial fossa on the ulna. So we call this ligament annular ligament. So the annular ligament surrounds the head of the radius and puts the head of the radius on the radial fossa on the ulna. Here is a lateral view that shows the radial collateral ligament, which is kind of a triangle and connects the radius to the ulna, and this way we are protecting the shoulder joint. Sorry, we're protecting the elbow joint from getting dislocated. Next is our hip joint, which is also ball and socket joint. This joint, as we know, is much deeper than the shoulder joint. It's also very mobile, but not as mobile as the shoulder joint. We have a few ligaments that supports the hip joint. An example of that is the ligamentum teres. And teres here just means that it looks like a tube. So this is what teres mean. So this is my ligamentum teres. So this is my ligamentum teres here. It's also called the ligament of the femoral head, and which is another name of it. And this ligament attaches the head of the femur to the acetabulum. We have also a few other ligaments. We have the pupofemoral, the ischio or ischiofemoral, and the iliofemoral. As we know that the hip bone is made of 3 different bones, and those 3 different bones, the first one's called ilium, the second one's called pupus, and the last one's called the ischium or ischium. So every one of these has a ligament that goes to contact or attach to the femur. So we have pubo, ischio, and iliofemoral ligaments. Knee joint is a modified hinge joint. It's a hinge joint because its main function is to do flexion and extension. However, we call it a modified hinge joint because it does a little bit of medial and lateral rotation as well, but it's not a very significant movement. That's why they just call it modified. But for now, you can think of hinge joint to be similar. Think of the knee joint to be similar to the elbow joint, and think about them that they are both hinge joints. The knee joints is composed of 3 articulations. We have the patella, we have the tibia, and we have the femur. The knee joint is a very important joint and has lots of supporting ligaments. So, for example, we have the lateral collateral ligament. It's also on the fibular side, so we call it fibular collateral ligament as well. And this one supports the knee joint laterally because it's on the lateral side. We have the medial collateral ligament, also called the tibial collateral ligament, and this one supports the medial side of the joint. In addition to that, we have 2 intra-articular joints. These ones are the anterior cruciate and the posterior cruciate. The anterior cruciate originate on the anterior surface of the tibia. So we call these ligaments based on their tibial attachment, not based on their femoral attachment, because on the femur they attach on the opposite side. So the anterior cruciate will attach to the tibia anteriorly and to the femur posteriorly, and the opposite, the vice versa, also for the posterior cruciate ligament, because they attach posteriorly on the tibia and anteriorly on the femur. Both of these ligaments could be injured. However, the posterior cruciate ligament is the strongest ligament of the knee. So let's see the picture. It makes it a little bit easier. As you can see here, there is a ligament that attaches anteriorly on the tibia and goes back on the femur. So since it's attaching anteriorly on the tibia, this is my anterior cruciate ligament. The other ligament here that attaches more posteriorly on the tibia and more anteriorly on the femur is going to be my posterior cruciate ligament. On the lateral side, I have the lateral collateral ligament, and since this is attaching to the fibula, it's called also fibular collateral ligament. And on the medial side, I have the medial collateral ligament, which is also called the tibial collateral ligament since it's also attached to the tibia. And here is just a posterior view and showing you the same ligaments. The knee anteriorly has the patella, and the patella is attached to the quadriceps tendon because we have a muscle here called the quadriceps femoris muscle, a muscle with 4 heads that and the tendon of this muscle attached to the patella. The patella has a ligament that attaches the patella to the tibial tuberosity, which is here. So we call this patellar ligament, or sometimes called patellar tendon, even though patellar ligament is a more scientifically correct name. We also said we have menisci here in the knee joint, so we have the medial and lateral menisci. So these are my menisci, and they are made of fibrocartilage, as we said earlier. Now we are done with this part of the joints. We will go over the function of the muscular system. The first thing, we know that the skeletal muscles produce movements. We know also that they maintain posture and position for our body. We know that it supports our soft tissues, just like our abdominal muscles, they support the soft tissues inside the abdomen. They also guard body entrances and exits, just like the muscles around the oral cavity, around the mouth, and the muscles around the anus. They also maintain body temperature. As we all know, if you are cold, you do shivering, and this reduces your body temperature. Muscles also store nutrients, since muscles are mainly made of protein, and if you are in a state of starvation, you do use your muscles for that. Muscle tissue. We have 3 different types of muscle tissue. We have skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, and smooth muscles. If we start with the skeletal muscles, these muscle fibers or muscle cells, actually we call skeletal muscle cells, we call them muscle fibers because they are very elongated like a fiber. So these ones are very long. They have multiple nuclei, and also they have striations. So if we go to this picture, I see muscle cells here, or muscle fibers, and these muscle fibers, every one of them has more than one nucleus, and all muscle fibers here are striated, and these striations actually are made of the function unit of the skeletal muscle, which is called the sarcomeres. You will cover this more in physiology. Then we have cardiac muscles. These are also striated muscles like the skeletal muscle. However, they are different because they are uninucleated. So in the cardiac muscle, you have only one nucleus per muscle. They're also branching, and in between them we have intercalated discs. So here is my cardiac muscle. Well, they're so similar to the skeletal muscle, but we have intercalated discs here that we didn't see in the skeletal muscle. And as you can see, we have big nuclei, and every cell has only one nucleus. So we don't have lots of nuclei here in one cell. And you can see this much better on this diagram, where you have big nuclei in the cells and you have only one nuclei. So let's go back to skeletal muscle here. So skeletal muscle, you have multiple small nuclei. The skeletal muscles are striated, but they're not branched, and there are no intercalated discs. Versus here, you have intercalated discs between muscle fibers, because this is a muscle cell or fiber. This is another one here. So, and as you see, these muscle fibers are branching. If we go back to skeletal muscle, this is all one muscle cell. So if this is your triceps, a muscle cell will start here at the origin and will go all the way to the insertion, one cell. So there is no interruption of the cells at any point. However, in the cardiac muscle, you will have a muscle here, and then a muscle cell here, and then a muscle cell here, and in between these muscle cells, there are intercalated discs. On these intercalated discs, we have gap junctions that allow the movement of ions between the cardiac muscle cells. The smooth muscle cells are very different because these are the only ones that are, these are involuntary, just like the cardiac muscle cells. However, these are the only ones that are non-striated. They have also one nucleus per cell, and they are fusiform or spindle shaped. So let's see these ones. So here, look at this picture first. So as you can see here, these muscles are fusiform or spindle shaped, and every muscle has one cell. So every muscle cell has one nucleus, Okay, so we are done with this video. Thank you for watching and have a great day.